Okay, this guy's really cool. Do you guys have questions? Because do you know how to use the Slido thing? I didn't know. I don't understand. What happened?
I like this.
Is that yours?
Oh, what happened?
Okay.
I didn't do it.
Do
Did not do that.
I want you to, while they're asking questions, this guy knows everything about tech. This guy knows everything about Oliver Stone's habits. This guy knows everything about Snowden. So I want you guys to figure out some questions that you want to ask very specifically. But first, I want you to tell you the story. I want you to tell me the story of what you did at Web Summit. We were just talking about it a second ago.
Yeah, so...
Introduce yourself. Tell them what you do.
Well, my name is Ralph, and I'm a computer hacker. And I've been doing this since I was 14. And the way I like to explain hacking is it's more of a way to make things do what they were not intended to do, or invented to do. And so it's not really necessarily a bad thing. It just comes with doing it without necessarily having the permission to do it. So I have been involved with Hollywood now for a little over 7 years in different ways. Originally was involved with sort of as an expert on the forensic side. Some important people got hacked, and they needed to know how they got hacked. So as a hacker, it's a good skill to have to do forensics on this. So I went in there and basically said, okay, I figured that out, and I figured the next one out, and then I got involved with the actual creatives in creating more of the films and so on and so forth, right? So at Web Summit, over the years, I've met a lot of different artists, from actors and writers and directors to painters, photographers, and all kinds of different artists. And the idea was, well, how do I get artists with technologists together? Because I think that there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of technologists who are also musicians. There's also a lot of technologists who are also martial artists. The word art is still in there. And so there's some sort of synergy between those worlds. And I thought that, you know, over different conversations, it would be good to get these people on one stage. So I produced a panel for Web Summit that basically had a guy by the name of Saul Williams, who is a legendary poet, hip-hop artist, writer, director, theater actor. So I got him on stage along with Rosario Dawson, who is an actress you might know from a few things, and this other gentleman named Saul Guy, who's more has been on the business side of music and film and television. And we basically had a discussion about, well, first it started with me talking for a little bit and hacking an audience member to show
how did you hack the audience member? Because this was pretty cool. You don't have to go into detail.
So, well, basically everybody has a cell phone in this room, right? So your cell phone sends out a little signal to the cell tower nearby. And there are devices mostly used by law enforcement that can read that little ping to the tower. So I could very quickly, in a matter of a few minutes, have all of your phone numbers. And then once I have that, I can also have every number that you've called in the last period of time that this device has been running. And so that's kind of how the information could be gathered. And then it's based on proximity too. So obviously the ones that are closer to me, if I was running the device here. So I basically brought a girl online and called her from her boyfriend's number on stage, which kind of scared her a little bit. But so after that, then we basically went into this panel discussion. But before we did that, as we introduced each one of these people on stage, I had Saul Williams actually perform one of his poems, which is all about hacking at a very metaphorical level, at a very social level. So,
so it's the marriage of art and technology.
Exactly.
All right, very cool.
Because I think that this is the thing. I had a very interesting conversation with a gentleman who started something called the Science and Entertainment Exchange, which is part of the National Academy of Sciences. And he's an older gentleman now, and he's a director, and he directed a movie called Airplane. But the whole, you know, I couldn't get it at first, and I asked, well, why? Well, why did you start the Science and Entertainment Exchange? How do scientists and filmmakers have anything to do with each other? And I thought he was going to tell me, you know, because we need to know how to make the film better. But no, he said, I have a daughter who was very sick, and there was no cure for what she had. And so I hired the best scientists and doctors, and they said she needs stem cell. You know, at the time, the U.S. government had banned stem cell research. And so he tried to connect all these scientists and doctors with the U.S. government to allow stem cell research, but they said no. They wouldn't even answer the call. And he said, but you know whose call they would answer? I said, who? He said, mine. I said, well, why yours? And he said, because I directed Airplane. So what he said to me was, that's the power of Hollywood. That's the power of entertainment. That's the true power of communication. So he said, you're in a unique place to be responsible, because the truth is that some people say that, you know, art imitates life, but the reality is that life imitates art. And so it's that kid who was 5 years old who watched Star Trek and saw the tricorder, who ultimately was a scientist who helped to create cellular networks. So we have a responsibility to each other. And ultimately, what we see on screen, we try to emulate and actually make real in technology.
Okay, let's hit some of these questions.
All right. Hacking the blockchain.
Is it possible?
Well, first of all, everything's possible.
Yeah.
Hacking anything is possible. However, you know, the nature of blockchain is transparency. So, you know, you could argue that if we all had each other's information, all of each other's information, then that information would have no value. So a lot of the hacking, as the way that you think of it, has to do with how you monetize and value information. So blockchain is one of those things that makes whatever that transaction is kind of transparent. And the biggest issue around some of the not so strong blockchains has to do with anonymity. If anonymity is important, then there's some blockchains that are not very anonymous.
Okay, is it easier to hack a startup or a bank? Which I suspect, well, you probably know the answer.
Well, the truth is, generally speaking, banks are pretty good at security. But having done security tests for banks and startups, it depends on the startup and the kind of resources that they have as far as their programming and expertise. But there has been banks that have been easier than startups. So I can't say that it's one or the other.
What should a startup do? What's the baseline for securing themselves?
Well, it really starts with the developers. It really starts in the development process. Thinking about security beyond, you know, the basic security by the developers is key. So, you know, take, for example, the decision to use a specific language versus another language because of ease of use or because of how knowledgeable someone is in that language isn't necessarily ever take that security component into consideration. So you should really look at, you know, if you're going to use PHP, why PHP versus, you know, some other language that might have stronger security. Okay.
Do you agree that hacking is not about cracking security and algorithms, but about getting information from people?
Human factor. I don't say that's an element of hacking is social engineering. And if any of you guys come to I'm going to do a little thing at the startup stage later, and you'll hear me say this. You can patch the software, and you can put patches to the process, but you cannot patch human stupidity. People are, by default, open to suggestion, and psychologically very easy to hack, especially when the requests you're making are simple requests. So you can ask for somebody's password if you know how to do it, and they'll tell you. So yes, it is a major factor, the social engineering. In fact, I think that's the real problem. The number one problem is you. It's not the tech. So
how do we fix that?
It is a matter of awareness.
Aside from the destruction of humanity.
I've seen that movie. Well, the way to fix that is to make these issues sort of digestible. I think that's the key. And I think once again, this is where the whole entertainment and the things that I've learned anyway from writers and from Hollywood is that you have to be able to make the stuff something that you want to know about, and that once we start talking about it, you're not just like, oh God, because I mean I'm sure if anyone here works at any large corporation or bank, you know, you have this thing called security awareness training, and whenever that comes up, everybody's like, oh great.
That's actually an interesting point. I don't want to. We've got about 3 minutes. I'm gonna ask you another question related to that. So, thinking about computer security on the screen, it's always like somebody like, I'm thinking the Jurassic Park situation when she's like moving through these cubes and opening these cubes and everything. It makes it very visual and understandable, even to a general audience. How do you make security that easy to understand and not make it being a pain in the ass to type in your password every time you want to move a file or whatever? How do you improve security to that degree? Because we can assume that those visuals are designed to make us understand what's happening on the screen and make the security better, right?
You're right, absolutely. And that is the problem, is that visualizing the experience of your data is something that it's not really out there very much. You see it in Hollywood, yeah, you do see it on the screens, obviously. A lot of different movies that have visualization in such a way where it works great for Hollywood, but that's not the way it works in the real world. And there hasn't really been much innovation in basically how to take your data and create a story and sort of gamify your data. Because I think once you do that, then you've got to turn this issue upside down. Right now, security, and every company I've known and ever worked with and for, treats the issue of security as something that is sold through fear, through uncertainty, and ultimately through doubt. And as I was telling you backstage, I got into computers because they were fun, and I got into hacking because it was fun. And it's pretty fun when you have the power of God in one finger, and you hit that, and then the whole thing can go down. It can do whatever you want it to. And so what about if we give you that power? But of course, we have to make it digestible enough for you to understand what you're doing. But it is your data, and you do have a finger. So you should be able to do the same thing and have fun with it, not be afraid of it.
Okay, so the last question, I saw one up here. Should banks in specific have guys like you on staff who aren't towing the company line and basically just want to break stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Breaking stuff is fun, and you should definitely have somebody who's just looking out to break stuff. In fact, I'll give you a little tidbit of things that you should be doing. It's called chaos testing. And it means different things to different companies. Like, if you look at the definition of chaos testing to Microsoft versus some other software development firms. But think of chaos like chaos, because in the real world it is chaos. So before you put a product out, make sure it's been tested for chaos, which is anything that can and will go wrong will go wrong. So, it's not just a matter of hacking it. Bring down that server. Pull the power cord. Mm-hmm. Do every possible thing that could happen in the real world that you can think of, even if it's low probability, just to see what can happen.
All right, beautiful. So you're doing a panel tomorrow, or when is this?
A little later on, I think
Okay.
at around 4 or 5 in the startup arena. I'll do just more of a 20-minute talk, and then tomorrow actually there's a leadership thing at the end of the day, and I'll be on that. So.
All right, this is the guy to talk to about security. Thank you very much.